Okay, I'm going to show you now the assignment example and what I want for layout, and then I'm going to show you some painting stuff. So this is what we want from the assignment. You can see that there is a scale from black to white. It's 10 steps, and then down at the bottom you see this gray strip. That's the neutral gray I mentioned. And the purpose of that strip is to see this gray against the black and then this gray against the white. See the relative contrast change that happens. So that's what this looks like. I'll post an image of this up in the assignment description. So the layout then for that is this. Please disregard my daughter's blue sparkle paint. I want you to take one of the halves of your illustration board and cut off a slice at the narrow side. So you're going to use about a quarter of the sheet, maybe less, maybe like a fifth or a sixth. So what I've done 10 inches wide, so it's easy to divide into 10. And then, and this is kind of ridiculous, 11 centimeters tall. So I've got at least a centimeter down here and then 10 centimeters here. So however you measurement, there's parameters for wanting it to be at least as big as in the assignment instructions, which I believe I do have at least 10 inches wide. Whatever you do, I want this gray strip to be at least a centimeter tall, not too much bigger, maybe a finger width at most. And you guys should know from 110, layout, use your T-square. Get your layout perfect first before you go any further. Make sure there's not any slanted lines or divisions. Make sure everything's great. Using the X-Acto knife on illustration board is tough. So make sure you've got a good metal ruler and you keep your fingers away from the edge while you're cutting and all that stuff. And, keep the blade upside down in the hasp, right? So about paint a little bit more. So all paint has a pigment, a binder, and a vehicle. So the pigment, the pigment is what makes the color. The binder is like the glue, and the vehicle is what you can use to extend or thin the paint. So with this paint, this is gouache, and gouache is really a type of watercolor. The difference is gouache has chalk added to it, and that makes this paint opaque, whereas watercolor, as you know, is transparent. So in traditional gouache, we've got the pigment, which would be like the titanium, and the binder, which would be gum arabic, which is a tree sap that dries and hardens. And then the vehicle is, of course, water. This is a little different gouache. This has an acrylic added to it so that when it dries, it won't reactivate. If you guys know, if you put water over watercolor, it will pull up color. So this resists that quite a bit. Something like acrylic paint, you've got the same idea. You've got pigment, and then the binder is acrylic polymer, and the vehicle is water. Oil paint, oil is the binder, and so on. Oil paint, which is what I mostly use on my paintings, you can see one behind me, uses oils that are called drying oils, like linseed oil, so that'll actually dry out and harden, where like vegetable oil won't. Okay, so let's look at this paint a little bit. Put this over here. So this paint requires us to add water to it. And what I've got is this little dropper for myself, but you can just use, your finger to make drops of water. And what I want to go for is to get this paint, look how I'm using one drop of water into that black, into that much black. What I'm trying to get, remember the squash and chop thing? What I'm trying to get is a mound of paint that will gradually relax when I make it up into a mound. So I go like this, and if that paint will gradually relax down, that's called self-leveling. That tells me that after being applied with a brush, those brush strokes will meld down on that small level as well. And that's how I can get a really flat surface. So, well, okay, here's a paintbrush. So back to my laid out grayscale here. I take our tape, right, and there's a lot of little things we want to do so that we get a straight edge, but we also don't pull up the paper surface. And what I would recommend, and this is both for the economy of the tape, is that you split it in half on a small assignment like this. You wouldn't want to do this on a bigger assignment or where you're using more paint because you might slop over the edge. But you can see I've got the tape like this. And what I'm going to do, so I'm going to decide, so I'm going to do black here and white here, and my two middle grays will go here. My true middle gray goes here, my true neutral gray. But since we've got 10 spaces, we don't have one exactly in the middle. So I'll lay this down right on the line, and I'm not pushing down with all kinds of force, okay? What I'm doing is I'm gradually tapping that down, and I'll use my fingernail to go right over the edge. I'm not going to put any pressure down over here. Just my fingernail right over the edge. And that's it. So the only place that's had a lot of pressure, or not a lot, again, the gentle pressure is right along that very edge. There's not pressure here because that would pull up the paper, right? So I'll get a little paint on the brush like that. And what I'll do, whenever possible, I'm going to come from the tape off. So I'm sort of jumping off the cliff there. Wow, I just noticed I would need to do that part down there. And people do this in different ways. Sometimes they put a strip all along the bottom and leave that there for the whole assignment, and then at the very end pull that off and do the gray. Or people do no strip here and let this go over the line, and then at the end cap it all off with the gray. You can go any way you think will work for you. I'll just do this one so I can show you a corner. I'm going to do the same thing with that corner. I'll just do a fingernail right on the edge there. And then right here where they overlap, I'm going to get my fingernail in, and I'm going to close that little hole that would be caused by their overlapping. Right there. Right there. I'm going to close that little hole. Then I get back to the paint. And one thing about gouache and watercolor, you know, is they dry quickly. So in this amount of time that I've been talking, enough water has evaporated that I'm going to put in another drop. And this is going to be a thing that you really should practice first. So maybe do this on some spare bits of paper or some of the stuff you cut off from the illustration board when you were making the strip, and get this right. Because you may not get it right the first time and you don't want to mess up the assignment by doing that. So a little bit of paint. I'm going to come, since I've got a corner nail here, I'm going to come from the corner out. So always in one direction. That's key too. And what I need to watch for is for this drying, because it dries so fast that if I keep going over it with the brush, it will bead up like glue. So again, I'm always, it's like rowing. I'm tapping down and then I'm picking up, down and up. I'm getting these brush strokes all in the same direction. This will dry in about 5 minutes, and I want you to wait between layers, at least 10 minutes. Every color that you paint, you will need at least 2 layers to really get it totally opaque. So remember that. Layer down, 10 minutes, next layer. And this is already drying for me. And so I'm going way faster than you guys should. So you guys should go a lot slower than what I'm doing. So for example, you could do the black one, and then you could go ahead and do the white one. And I want you to paint the white. I don't want you to leave it paper white. And the reason for that is the white that we're using to make all the grays is going to be the paint white, the titanium. And so we want the white to be that same white from the titanium that's been mixed into all the grays. So again, you guys wait. I've done this quite a bit, so I'm going to go ahead and do it. So I did all my first brush strokes this way. Now I'm going to crisscross and I'm going to come a different direction with my brush strokes. And that's going to really help flatten the surface. And this time I can go along the edge of the tape. Again, I'm not going to go too many brush strokes or else that'll bead up like white glue and dry out. So I'm going to leave it. Now, when you're going to pull up the tape, say I'm done with my layers of paint, I want you to wait at least 15 minutes, because what happens is right underneath the tape, the paper gets humid. And when it's humid, it's more likely to stick to this adhesive and pull up paper. So of course, since the vehicle's water, we can use water to clean this brush, right? We can use water to clean everything. So this class would be a lot more difficult technically if we did oil paint. But that's what's great about this. It's super opaque, so we can see the color. We can see the exact color we mixed. So we don't have paper white coming through and showing us undertone. We've got mass tone. And so we don't have any tinting happening because the papers come through. Okay, when I'm ready to pull this up, and mine's not completely dry yet, you wait until it's completely dry. Don't do what I'm doing. I'm going to tape the tape, and I'm going to go the one that's on top first. And what I'm doing, I'm not going to rip this straight up like this. I'm actually going to pull a little bit towards this way. And that's going to cause the tape to come up like this instead of being ripped like that. We want the tape to come up gently like this. So I'm going to grab it and I'm going to hold down with my thumb and I'm going to pull it. Like that. And then this one, I'll do the same thing. And what I want to be careful of now is because I'm pulling tape off from the edge here, I don't want to catch that edge and pull the edge off and rip up the paper. So what I'm going to try and do is I'm going to pull in a little bit and get this edge lifted before I go for the painted edge. Just a little bit, not all the way over. And let's see if I got it. So I'm doing the same thing. I'm going to pull towards me. Like such. And here we go. You can see my paint's still a little wet, but we've got a pretty sharp edge done with paint. You see my pencil mark still left down there. So that's what you're after, and I would totally practice this first before you go for it on your assignment. And the way I'd go, I would do the black, do the white, and then I would mix up one of these two middle grays. And then once you've got that mixed, white and black together make gray. Once you've got that middle mixed, then you do the one in between that and the black, so this one. And then that way you can calibrate what goes in between what. And so then you'll have these two, and you'll do this one. You have these two, you'll do this one. And then do the same thing on the other side. That about does it.
Be sure to ask me questions in the discussions, and I'll talk to you later.